Yeah. Very good. Yeah, this was a good study to go through.
Mm-hmm. And this is sort of the wrap-up review session to go over
Wow. Yeah.
and solidify everything and look at any remaining questions.
Yeah.
We never have any questions.
No.
Well, if we don't have any questions about the mystery of God, we
We just don't understand anything. Yeah, there you
I think you know God, you don't. I know.
go. Yeah, there you go.
we have metaphors that gives us ideas of some of it, but
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Jesus spoke in metaphors.
Yes.
He did a lot. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, this book that I got today, Descendant of, is a lot about the mystery of the Holy Spirit and how through most of the history of the church, most people have not really understood what the Holy Spirit is about, and about how the church has gradually come to understand about the Holy Spirit.
And this one seems to do a good job.
Today.
I
Yeah,
got this at
it
the
was a
San Jose Library,
university
so it's a
book.
San Jose University book. And after
This-
jumping through a couple hoops, we managed to borrow it on my San Jose Public Library card. But they
Descent
won't
of
do
the
a whole
Dove.
this because I'm not officially part of the university, just part of the public library system. They won't do a whole where they would go get it and bring it to my local library for me.
Ah,
Anne took me down to the main library itself so we could find this and get it out.
all
It was
right.
fun. I got to read some great children's books and the way grab a child's book as I go by and read
Oh,
it.
those are fun.
It was fun.
Children's books made up a lot of my curriculum from college.
As you study a foreign language.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
it is. But it's charming.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we should probably start Romans 12. Get rolling.
So it says restate this verse in your own words.
Yeah, so somebody will read again Romans 12 to a central verse in our study, and then we'll see if anybody wants to go for the restating.
I gave an idea. I had an idea, but you have an idea too. So I see that after.
Well, yeah, I gave one example, but I had lots of time to think about it and play with it. I don't. Yours may not be as polished, which is fine.
Well, that's probably
especially
true.
if we're doing it off the cuff, you wouldn't expect it. Will somebody reread the verse? Does anybody have the verse up?
I have it on the King James.
Okay, go ahead.
And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God.
Mm-hmm.
So what I wrote without looking at it is, do not just do what others are doing or let others decide what you should do.
Good.
Keep listening to Jesus. Keep connecting to God. Always look for and follow God's will. Keep learning God's good and perfect will.
Mm-hmm.
Because
I like
we keep learning. That's what we just talked about. We keep learning. You know?
Yeah, I like that.
That was good. That was good. I think to me, it sounds more like don't get caught in the dualistic thinking of this world, which is all about success and profit and whatever else. But have your mind transformed so that you can see the oneness of God. And if you can see the oneness of everything, then you will be able to access what is the good and acceptable. You'll be able to understand better what the will of God is.
And I think that restatement really captures how ambitious this project is. That God and Paul here are acting you to do something really incredible here. So
right. And I think it has a lot to do with looking at life differently. not looking at the world life as, the average materialistic person. That's
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
not,
actually in Nehemiah, but not the part that we
Mhm.
have.
Yeah, so what do you think are some ways we can actually do this? Maybe some things that we've looked at in the course of this Bible study, because this is a very ambitious project that Paul is setting out here.
well, the words that
Oh,
come
what
to
did we
mind.
learn?
Well, I
Go,
think
Dan.
it may not be about what I learned, but how I learn it. It's a different point of view. And it's what is too many facts and figures, and I can't figure out God by facts and figures. But how I learn it is being open to experience, like how God will do work in my life, which comes up in a minute. What ways has God worked in your life, made a
Mhm.
difference? I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but
yeah.
Yes, that is true. That allowing God to work in your life will allow this transformation of your mind.
Right.
yeah, yeah,
Keep thinking maybe there's a thing to learn here, and maybe maybe I don't see it completely, and try to see if I can learn completely.
Well, I think this whole thing, as we go on through the chapter that talks about loving and being kind to others, I think that if you are looking at, if your mind is transformed, you will see that you want to do those things. It will be uh, maybe easier for you to do them if you just, let God do them, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
let
because there's
God,
an
let
extent
God.
where we can't do everything. We have to let God's power work in us and through us to do things
In
sometimes.
us and through us, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And remember in the 70s, I guess, let go and let God.
Mm-hmm.
Short, sorry.
Yeah, that verse from Psalm, be still and know that I am God, that somehow just
Yeah, yeah,
letting God be
Ah,
God and because
being
he's the
receptive.
essence of being and he can transform you from the inside out with his power. So there's a certain extent where letting God
yeah.
is a key component of this. So we're going to look
It's good
at
to be.
Nehemiah 11 and see for a little
But
bit we can
what
see.
I did was go back through Nehemiah, because it wasn't making sense to me that what are the administrators taking up residence. So I went back, and in Nehemiah before 11, Nehemiah convinced King Azariah Assyria, something, whatever the
This
title
is
of
actually
the
King
king.
Xerxes is his English names.
Okay.
Going from
Xerxes?
Old Persian to Hebrew and then to English produces a different
Wow.
sound in when you take the same Old Persian word and translate it into Greek first and then into Latin and then into English. So it,
Tell us
Okay.
the more
that.
common historical name for this person is Xerxes, but Ahasuerus is what happens when you take that same Old Persian name, which has a strong guttural K in the beginning, and write it
Okay,
in
good.
Hebrew and then try to translate that into English. You
That
can
makes a
have
whole
Thank
different.
you. That helps with the translations of things. So he persuaded him to let him go to Jerusalem. There's then destroyed this very important place, Jerusalem, and we need to rebuild it. And so then, but one of the things that in the next chapter is I'm going to say Jews with power were enslaving other Jews.
It was
They
a
were
very complicated
enslaving them.
situation of trying to get everybody
They
to
were
work together to
enslaving their
rebuild the wall
land. They were
because there was also
before
not
that.
everybody around wanted the Jews back in power. A lot of the says we don't like Jews, we don't want to see them back, and so there was a lot of issues with that. And also, not everybody wanted to invest in this new place. They had had a good life in Persia, and just abandoning that and putting all their
And so
resources
we
on
should just take
scam.
over all
It
these
was a
guys,
business
and
to
they
rebuild
should serve
Jerusalem.
us. And
It wasn't a
yeah.
certainty, but Nehemiah was trying to convince them, no, we want to return to our roots and
Uh-huh.
honor the God of our ancestors. And so there was a lot of
He
internal,
built-
not everybody wanted to be all in on this new project. Because a lot of people
There you
said,
go. And
nobody likes us. Why should we even bother building here? So it
And
was,
Ezra preached about what they were Jews that were enslaving other Jews. Because
and
those guys, they shouldn't, I should get everything because I should have everything.
No.
And then Ezra preached and the people came along with but Nehemiah was in charge of rebuilding Jerusalem and
Mhm.
kept getting
That-
people
that
back to redo it.
God's prophetic mission for Nehemiah was to bring people back and rebuild Jerusalem. And eventually they got it rebuilt, but there was still this issue of getting everybody settled down in it so it would be a thriving city once again.
Yeah.
That is where
Okay.
what's happening here in Nehemiah 11, 1-6 is.
Then it just helped. But
They're
then there's
finally getting
the
to the place where some
the
people's
doing
mind
it,
has been
yeah.
transformed. So if somebody read Nehemiah 11, 1-6.
Joan, do you want to read that or do you want me to?
I could read that. No, go ahead, Anne. Go ahead.
I mean, I've just been talking all the time. But the administrators took up residence in Jerusalem. I just printed them out, that's why. And the rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 man in 10 to reside in Jerusalem, the holy city. And the other 9 men would remain in the other cities. The people blessed all those who willingly agreed to take up residence in Jerusalem. These are the heads of the province who took up residence in Jerusalem. In the cities of Judah dwelt Israelites, priests, Levites, temple servants, and the descendants of Solomon's servants, each on the property they owned in their own cities, which is part of what Nehemiah had done earlier, is talk them, you have to give them back their land and stop this.
Yeah, because there was a law that God had set up originally when he brought people back about specific lands go to specific family, and that is inherited no matter what. You cannot, it's an inalienable right. You cannot just sell this right away. He had set up laws, so no, it was in perpetuity. That family always owned this land, no matter what. That was always their home. So Nehemiah was
But they did,
for the
they
original.
tried to get them, the people, that still the rich people came in and said, you don't really own this, you sort of own this land, fine, sort of, but then you owe me everything. Yeah. So.
That there
But
was
in Jerusalem,
it in Jeremiah that there was this tendency for them to then try to get around that, to add house to house, to try to get around it so that you could have a big estate by somehow sort of absorbing your neighbor's land, even though the law that God had set up said no, you couldn't own that land permanently. People would try to get around it, and
there you go. I didn't have that.
Their minds hadn't been renewed, had they?
right. So that was part of the renewal process. Was Nehemiah had to go through the process of breaking up and saying no. If this is the family right of this, they have to have full possession of that land, and
Give it back to them.
that they had to.
I can read the names again. In Jerusalem dwelt both Judahites and Benjamites. Of the Judahites, Athalah, son of Isaiah, son of Zechariah, son of Amariah, son of Shephatiah, son of Mahalal. And right. Of the sons of Perez, Masala, son of Baruch, son of Kol Hosea, son of Haziah, son of Idaiah, son of Jolarib, son of Zechariah, a son of Shelonites. The total of the descendants of Perez, who dwelt in Jerusalem was 468 people of substance.
So this was a time where they did enough work on transferring their mindset that they had a bunch of people now that were willing to go ahead, and people of substance who were go ahead and actually move their lives to Jerusalem, which was a commitment to this idea of Israel remaining as an entity in this place, because to make a life in Jerusalem viable, you needed to have
Yeah,
Israel once again being a power in the area, like they had been before.
they became willing to move to a new city. That's the
Uh-huh.
Jerusalem thing.
And it was
Yeah. Huh.
basically a change of focus of your life, because now you weren't just focused on maintaining your family and maintaining a life for them. You had to now, to do that, you had to try to work for the good of Israel, because you had basically put all your chips on Israel now by moving here. So
Mhm.
A slight,
And you saw that as an indication that they had been transformed.
yes.
They were willing to look beyond their own security. And
Uh-huh.
Okay. Yeah.
So they were committed to their community now in a different way.
right. And I think that is part of the new mind that he wants, that we work in community
Yeah.
together.
together. Yeah.
Jesus' message.
That last paragraph just surprised me because I think of Perez, Perez, as a Hispanic last name. And obviously it's been around for a lot longer than that.
Mhm.
Where do you think they got it? There you go.
Exactly.
I mean, because they have Jesus and Maria are common names in Latin culture, so they do accept observing some biblical names.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So they may very well have observed this.
Yeah, there's West Side Story.
Yeah, this I remember Abraham's and Nathaniel's and other kinds of names right out of the Bible in South America. People had so many Bible names.
Uh-huh. So I'm not. You'd have to do a study if the Hispanic last name derived from a biblical last name, or they could have just be a coincidence of sounds. But
And
Yeah.
it could have been Moorish. That's all
Interesting
mixed.
thought. Yeah, I think that's a good thought.
Anyway, sorry to sidetrack you. I
okay,
apologize.
so these Israelites have changed the focus of their life by moving. Has anything ever inspired you to change the focus of your life?
Lots. Let's see what
Major
first.
changes from the outside, like being left with three teenage daughters and no source of income,
Mm-hmm.
except what I could get from unemployment, as long as I kept up on my classes at Foothill.
Yeah, which you taught more than took.
You did it.
You asked me the questions if you were running the class.
It was a really fun experience, because this one class that started out with more than 200 people, before the end of the you can drop this course time, it was like 35. I mean,
Oh no.
and I couldn't quit. I knew I should quit because it was incomprehensible, but I didn't quit because I would have lost my $1,000 a month, which was my only income at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started asking every question I could think of, and pretty soon I understood it, and the other people understood it. And at the final, after class, people would come and ask me things instead of the professor. And then at the final exam, two people actually came up to me and said, I couldn't have passed this class if it wasn't for you. So anyway,
Yeah.
that was too much of a sidetrack. You didn't need to hear
No,
that.
Well, I
no,
mean,
it's
No, it is not a
learning from
sidetrack.
others can be very important
Exactly.
part of
Yeah.
learning and transforming. I mean,
Yeah,
Not a
I
side.
think
that
at
was
times
just
I've
really
changed my life and
inspiration.
changed my orientation, especially in a positive way. It has included learning from others and seeing what was inspiring in my environment.
yeah.
Mhm.
Having a son with Down syndrome did a fair amount of change.
Yes, yes. Inside out. When I think about it now, I think
Inside out, yeah.
is that when it happened, I was terrified. And it's become an adventure, which is good. Also in the way that
And you started a whole group of
Yeah.
parents and all that stuff. Yeah.
pods, parents of Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
And I got to go to special ed, working as substitute in classes because I could go sort of do something and then keep
And going
going
to another
and went into
country,
special ed.
and going to another country, we both went to Venezuela for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Yeah.
An enlightening experience.
And really we're in a different culture.
Anyway, who are you listening? Did
So
you
we're
want
going to look at
So there are some
Romans
changes.
8:28, which is our next verse. It's about how we can be comfortable with changing their focus, how the Israelites could be comfortable moving to a new city. So maybe we'll look up Romans 8:28 and read that.
Okay, I've got the one that you wrote out, which I
Okay.
Yeah.
New American Standard.
Yeah.
Know that all things work for good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. So in this case, you're saying that the people who chose to go back to Jerusalem were being called.
Yes, it's
According
very clear. Nehemiah was definitely a prophet.
Mhm.
And God's message to him was that people should move back. And so people who did move back were aligning with God in that way, because he clearly said that people of Jewish descent should move back at this particular time.
Mhm.
whole sidetrack? I don't want to sidetrack you guys.
No, go ahead.
There was a book my parents gave me called A Message to Hadrian, and it was written by Hadrian in Italy, going, okay, all you guys in other countries, you need to come home. You've been in wherever you are way too long, and now it's Scotland, and it's time to come home now. Everybody come home. It never made it out of the country. So they never, all these families who had kids and grandkids that were now in Scotland were supposed to go home because he asked them to, but they never got the letter. And that's the story of Adrian. I kind of like it because it's like they didn't need to leave. They were like where they were for generations.
Mm.
I
And
don't
there
mean I
was some
think that was-
provincial protection of them in that, because Scotland was safer than some other places sometimes.
yeah,
During like World War II, Scotland was one of the safer places to be.
yeah.
Mhm.
So
Good point. It was.
though there is also the history of a lot of Jews going back to Israel, and that saved some of them, but it also, there's still issues where they're not even safe there necessarily. So
No,
It's true.
Hasidics and Ashkenazi.
uh-huh.
Hasidics stayed in the country. Ashkenazi left and went to Peru and Europe and every other, the diaspora. Those are Ashkenazi.
Mhm.
And so this, it's just different. You know, the other ones, Hasidics stayed in town. They stayed in Israel or came back to Israel.
Thank you.
What a mess it is. That's needing prayers when we get to the end.
Mhm.
Ukraine.
Yes, that's prayers for sure.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
agree.
But let's keep going. The next one's kind of a toughie for me because it seems like, well, let's read it now. Shut up. Move on to the
Well,
next.
Okay. Do you?
How much do
So
we
we
want to
read that
read?
God has said He will do good. Do you believe this?
Yeah. That God will do good? Yes, I do.
That things will come out good in the end.
Mhm.
That's, I
The
mean, that's
ends
kind of what,
justify the means, no. But yes, all
there
good.
might be things that don't look real good in the present moment, like my husband leaving me,
Mhm.
but which turn out to be really to my advantage. I got much more to think for myself and find my own path to God. So,
I mean,
you
and
know,
also there's sometimes when I do not want to to rely on my own identification of what God's calling is, because I could be wrong about what God is calling me to do, and therefore,
Mm. Mhm.
I don't want to say God is obliged to give me good things, because if I was wrong about what He's calling me to do and I was doing something He wasn't calling me to do, this promise would not apply, which I think could very well happen for some people, because I do not think it's always easy to tell exactly what God is calling you to do.
if that's very difficult,
Really?
very difficult.
Really?
Amen, amen.
Yeah.
Man.
And the other thing that's difficult is to have a sense of whether you are called according to his purpose. And I guess the answer to that is yes, you are called according to his purpose.
It's just a matter of figuring out what exactly is He calling you to do.
Right.
And that will usually involve loving other people, but exactly how and where can sometimes be harder
Mhm.
to figure
How do you
out.
use your skills? What did Gandhi say? Lose yourself in the service of others?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to go back to Romans 12 just for a minute to
Sure.
snip in and look at verse 12, which says, continuing steadfastly in prayer.
Mhm.
Oh,
That is one of the keys to keep you called according to his purpose, because
Uh-huh.
you can end up leading through prayer, and not that I claim that I have particularly, but that it's what you need in order to be not conformed to this world. That's
Right.
one of the
That
ways.
will allow God to do the work of transforming you, because you don't have the, because like
Right.
I don't have the intelligence and wisdom to know exactly how I need to transform, but God does. And if I just let him do it and stay continuously in prayer to let him do that, he will be the one who transforms me in a way that is wise and is is conformed to his purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can all have faith that we are conformed to his purpose or called according to his purpose, but we may struggle with having to know what that is. Beyond knowing, love one another, be kind and affectionate, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Back to Romans 12. I see why you love that chapter, Aliyah.
Uh-huh.
thank you.
Yes. And I do think
Thank
the
you
whole
both. Thank you,
chapter
John.
does reflect on, that's why I did the whole chapter. I think it does reflect on this very difficult way of how to actually be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Mm-hmm.
So in this promise of God to do good, what do you think good means in this context?
As I see God, I try to do that. That's doing good. Since I see God as doing good and being good, trying to copy that or at least emulate that is about the best I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I may not know where it's leading. There's a book
Well,
called The
when
Good.
God promised he's going to do good for you, and we know he's called us according to the purpose, and as long as we stay in that purpose, he will do good, will bring good to you. What do you think God is going to bring to you when he means when he says he's going to bring good to you?
But we don't know. We don't know. We get to be taught maybe what good is in circumstances. There's some more permanent circumstances that it seems like they're, so how do you go from here to good? But good is, you can see good, looking to see God's work, good, looking, ask
And
him to see
God
God's work
allowing
in
you
the
to see
good.
the good in what he has brought you, even if that wasn't what you initially pictured in good, can help you in further transforming your mind. Yes.
And again, I go back to this: if you're being kind to people, you're going to feel good.
Yeah.
No,
Just if you're being kind and brotherly love, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
honoring one
Yeah.
another.
yeah.
So I want to look at one time when God did bring good to those who were called according to the purpose. So this is Genesis 44. It's the whole chapter. So it's a long reading, but if somebody would read Genesis 44.
All right. You want to split it or you want me to read it, John? What?
Go ahead and start and then tell me when to take over.
Okay, then Joseph commanded his steward, fill the men's bags with as much food as they can carry. So this is going back to them coming back to
Yes,
get
this is
more food for the
when
family.
Joseph is down in Egypt and he has become the steward of Egypt. And there's a famine in the whole Middle East, but his brothers have come from Canaan to buy the food that Egypt has. Egypt has
And
So
so
then
that,
Joseph was in a position of power,
yes.
even though they sold him to slavery,
Mm-hmm.
and he was able to provide food for them. But then Joseph wanted to see his youngest brother. and he
Mhm.
told them to come back. So this is when they came back the second time
Uh-huh.
with Benjamin. Yeah.
Yes.
So then in the mouth of the youngest one's bag, so in the bag, mouth of the bag, put in also my silver goblet together with the money for his grain, like give it back to him. The
Mhm.
steward did just as Joseph had said. So at daybreak, the men and their donkeys were set off. They had not gone far out of the city when Joseph said to his steward, "Go out at once after the men. When you overtake them, say, 'Why did you repay good with evil? Why did you steal my silver goblet? Is it not the very one from which my master drinks and which he has uses for divination?' Oh boy. What have you done? What you have done is wrong." When the steward overtook
Okay,
them,
I can take
repeat,
over if you want. I'll
say
take
again.
over. When the steward overtook them and
Thank you.
repeated these words to them, they said to him, "Why does the Lord say such things? Far be it from your servant to do such a thing. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money that we found in the mouths of our bags." The first time they got money back too, I guess.
Mhm.
How could we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have the goblet, he shall die.
That's us.
The rest of us, we shall become the Lord's slaves. But he replied, "Now what you propose is fair enough, but only the one who is found with it shall become my slave, and the rest of you can go free." Then each of them quickly lowered their bags to the ground and opened it. And while the search was made, starting with the oldest and ending with the youngest, the goblet turned up in Benjamin's bag. At this, they tore their garments. Then, when each man had loaded his donkey again, they returned to the city. So they were going to stick with Benjamin. You want to take over?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. When Judah and his brothers entered Joseph's house, Joseph was still there, so they flung themselves on the ground before him. "How could you do such a thing?" Joseph asked them. "Did you not know that such a man as I could discern by divination what happened?" Joseph, Judah replied, "What can we say to my lord? How can we plead, or how can we try to prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. Here we are then, the slaves of my lord, the rest of us no less than the one in whose possession the goblet was found." Joseph said, "Far be it from me to act thus. Only the one in whose possession the goblet was found shall become my slave. The rest of you may go back unharmed to your father." Judah then stepped up to him and said, "I beg you, my lord, let your servant appeal to my lord. Do not become angry with your servant, for you are the equal of Pharaoh. My lord asked his servants, 'Have you a father or another brother?' So we said to my lord," this is when they went before, "'We have an aged father and a younger brother, the child of his old age.'" This one's full. Turn page. "This one's full brother is dead. And since he is the only one by his mother who is left, his father is devoted to him. Then you told your servants, 'Bring him down to me that I might see him.' We replied to my lord, 'The boy cannot leave his father. His father would die if he left him.' But you told your servants, 'Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see me again.' When we returned to your servant, my father, we reported to him the words of my lord. Later, our father said, 'Go back and buy some food for us.' So we reminded him, 'We cannot go down there. Only if our youngest brother is with us can we go, for we may not see the man if our youngest brother is not with us.' Then your servant, my father, said to us, 'As you know, my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them, however, has gone away from me.' I said, 'He must have been torn to pieces by wild beasts. I have not seen him since. You take this one from me too. A disaster befalls him. You will send my white head down to Sheol in grief. So now, if the boy is not with us, when I go back to your servant my father, whose very life is bound up with the boy's, he will die as soon as he sees that the boy is missing. and your servants will thus send the white head of your servant our father down to Sheol in grief. Besides, I, your servant, have guaranteed the boy's safety for my father, so saying, if I fail to bring him back to you, Father, I will bear the blame before you forever. So now let me, your servant, remain in place of the boy as the slave of my Lord. Let the boy go back with his brothers. How could I go back to my father if the boy were not with me? I could not bear to see the anguish that would overcome my father.
Wow.
Yeah.
He knows how to direct a play, don't he?
Yeah, he knows
Oh.
how to appeal to Joseph. Yeah.
I like the question. Did Joseph's brother, I think Aaron, I think, did have a reason to trust Joseph's goodness at this point?
As they
Yep.
just know this guy, they don't know he's Joseph. They
No.
just see him as this steward of Pharaoh. They know he's very powerful, and he seems to be Egyptian to them, probably. He's at least very much
Yeah.
part of Egyptian society, which does not probably have the best reputation. Egypt conquered other lands, by which they meant they sent raiding parties that would extract tribute. So when the Egyptians record that they were ruling over Canaan, it didn't mean they actually like were making laws that actually were enforcing Canaan. It meant that they were sending armies that said, "Give us gold, or we're going to burn you all." So
Well, I guess they did have a reason. He did have a reason to trust Joseph, because the first time they went down to buy grain, the money they had spent was left in their bags when they returned. So that
and then
maybe
they had been able to show their good faith by bringing that money back again. So
yeah, and they brought the younger brother who he'd asked for. So
Yeah.
and they had made a good plea. Here, Judah does make a good plea. I mean, I'm not sure how good it would be, considering that he does mention the half brother of Benjamin, who's actually Joseph. And I mean, I'm
Right.
not sure what that would have brought up for Joseph, but I'm sure it brought up something. But the fact that Abraham was still grieving the loss of that son who he thought was torn by a beast, I mean, that probably did touch Joseph in some way too.
Yeah. He sure knows how to write a play.
Yeah. Yeah, God has orchestrated this whole thing that we see that. So, and yes, Joseph is participating in this play because he did this whole thing where put the money back and put this goblet that Joseph very well knows is this special sacred goblet in Benjamin's bag. So he's
Yeah.
making the drama
Yeah.
here too.
But he's setting him up.
And
And
in the
having a
end, both
servant
God
put that
and
into his
Joseph
bag
are
and
going
then
to do
calling him on
something
it.
good for Judah and his brothers here. Even though they don't immediately see it, they, in the end, Judah and his brothers do benefit by this whole drama thing that's going on, because Joseph does show them favor in the end. So,
By sending him to Israel.
well, yes, they sent him to the land of Goshen, but
Ocean.
that leads to their slavery, which wasn't good. But then they are redeemed from slavery and taken back to the promised land too. So,
Right.
They didn't get kicked out of there too. History is weird. I wish history wasn't such a well, not Christianity, but most religions are a story of wars, and that always bothers me.
Lots of
Right.
that's for sure.
God
have
should
you
be
read any Tom Holland history books?
Tom Holland.
Yes. I know there's an actor called that, but this is not the actor. This is a historian who specialized in Greek and Roman history, but also does things like he does Muslim and Christian history too. And it's very interesting how he says, okay, what is happening? okay, there is a lot of violence here. What's driving the violence or the lack of violence in these different cultures as he looks at these? How different
Oh,
cultures and religions change. And one thing he has showed is that if you look at his history of Christianity dominion, it's about how, okay, look, if he's a specialist, he talks about how, okay, when I first got into actually looking at, as a kid, I thought Roman history sounded great and sounded glorious. But when, as an adult, I actually looked at it, the Romans were, by his modern, he's English, so by his modern British sensibilities, they were totally depraved and they were so violent and
Yeah,
so brutalized
which
too.
of course led to the Roman
Suffering.
Catholic Church.
But he says, okay, what happened? How did we go from this culture to the culture I have now, which is
Yeah,
so descended from the Roman Empire, but is not at all like them in their morality. And in his book Dominion, he goes to how Christianity influence changed the whole culture around to
mm,
say there's something wrong with violence. So the very fact that we think something is wrong with violence is a reflection of how much Christianity has already transformed our culture.
and grown.
Hmm.
Uh-huh.
Still growing. We're still in our infancy.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
So let's
So,
look at the rest of the story of Joseph. Somebody will read
Sure, who's there?
the
I'm
well,
gonna,
I've got it
Genesis
tagged up.
45, 1 through 16.
Yeah, you're next, and then we can switch.
Joseph could no longer restrain himself in the presence of his attendants, so he cried out, "Have everyone withdraw from me." So no one attended him when he made himself known to his brothers. But his sobs were so loud that the Egyptians heard him, and so the news had reached Pharaoh's house. "I am Joseph," he said to his brothers. "Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could give him no answer, so dumbfounded were they.
Just
Him. "Come closer," he said, Joseph told his brothers. Then, when they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold in Egypt. But now do not be distressed. I, I do not be angry with yourselves for having sold me there. It was really for the sake of saving lives that God sent me here ahead of you. The famine has been in this land for 2 years now, and for 5 more years cultivating will yield no harvest. God therefore sent me on ahead of you to ensure you a remnant on the earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not really you, but God who had me come here, and he has made me a father to Pharaoh, Lord of all his household and ruler over the whole land of Egypt.
I can read the last paragraph if you want.
Okay.
Hurry back then to my father, and tell him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. You can settle in the region of Goshen, where you will still be near me, you and your children and your children's children, your flocks and your herds and everything you own. I will provide for you there in the 5 years of famine that lie ahead, so that you and your household and all that are yours will not suffer want. Surely you can see for yourselves, and Benjamin can see for himself that it is I who is speaking to you. Tell my father all about my high position in Egypt and all that you have seen. But hurry and bring my father down here." Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept on his shoulder. Joseph then kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And only then were his brothers able to talk with him, because they're all standing with their mouths open.
Mm-hmm.
The news reached.
I can see why you picked this, Aaliyah, because it really reflects to the first thing of how we had something that really went wrong and how did you make it better? How did you make the best of a bad situation? That was
And
an interesting.
there's one thing that's you don't see in this translation, because I was remembering a different translation where Joseph says, "You meant selling me to slavery for evil, but God meant it for good." So this is a
Yeah.
way that God sees good possibilities even in temporary evils.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily know. There's some that seem really evil, but we don't really know. Yeah, we can't assume that we know. We can only make as much good as we can out of it, and ask God for help to tell us how to do this, how to make good out of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So would the goodness of Joseph or of God behind this good outcome?
Well, God.
But I
But it
mean,
was also
Joseph
Joseph.
has grown in goodness also. We
Absolutely.
see through everything Joseph has been through, God has worked in transformation in him too.
He
Right.
keeps following through. Joseph keeps going, keeps following through. Yeah.
But you can see that God was the first one who foresaw this possible outcome. He started working for it.
Yeah, not
Back in heaven.
allowing him to be killed. No, you can't kill him. You can't leave him there to die. You can't. So here come some people. Oh, well, maybe we can sell him. Okay. Speaking of slaving.
I mean, obviously, Joseph's time in slavery was not in and of itself a good idea, but it wasn't good for Joseph to be a slave per se, but he did have some good outcome through the whole experience.
Yeah.
Got himself out of it.
Got himself thrown in prison first, actually was unjustly thrown into prison.
Right, he
Yeah.
was unjustly thrown into prison, but the
Then
fact
he had
that
all
God gave him prophetic dreams and knowledge of how to interpret dreams did eventually get him out
Right.
of position.
It was Nelson Mandela.
Yeah. Nelson
Got out.
Mandela, how many years in prison?
27.
Oh my God.
Way too many. Anyway, whole nother world, but a similar pattern.
But I mean,
Yeah,
people like Martin Luther, God has sometimes used their time in jail to let them do good things too, because they were
Right.
pretty called according to His purpose. So God could use them to create good things, even when they were going through bad things like being in jail. You could
Yeah.
see in Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, some of the times he was in jail, God did. They may not have been good per se, but God could sometimes use that in good ways.
Yeah, all those letters he wrote from prison
Yeah.
and the influence that they had.
And people that are in prison for doing God's work are, they send love to the people around them. They're bringing something into prison.
So I think we do see this tendency of God can bring good even through things that appear on the surface. We don't like them, but God can bring good often through them. So, and
Even out of
Christ
stuff that
can
is
be a
only on the
long-term,
surface.
slow to come to fruition good. That we can see, okay, we can accept, okay, as we follow God's purpose, we may not always see immediately how God bringing good, but in the long term, God can bring good even when we don't see it immediately.
In many circumstances, yes, there is a fair amount of stuff that's like, if you're going to have, never mind. Too much. There can be too much.
Okay, anything else on Romans 12:2 before we wrap up this Bible study? Okay, please like and subscribe to follow my next Bible study.